Welcome to the Green Wasp Removal YouTube channel. In this update video, we check the progress of a Polistes Metricus Paper Wasp nest that was relocated from the wild and put into captivity for study in late May of 2022. Check out our other YouTube videos for previous updates about this nest, and we'll have more coming as this nest develops over the 2022 wasp season. What you see in this video is the Metricus foundress beginning to pull out a larva, one of the smaller ones, from the edge of the nest. The larva is actually still attached to the side of the nest. They don't detach from the nest until later in their development. So you'll see as the foundress pulls the larva out, it actually separates part of the body of the larva because it's still stuck to the nest at this point in its development. And she begins to malaxate it here, which is chewing it up to turn it into pulp to feed the larva. Typically what you'll see is they attack the head first. They do this with pretty much all their prey. It's an instinctual thing. They attack the head and the neck area and try to kill the prey or disable it enough so that they can eat it. And she's doing that here with the larva. It may seem like a disturbing thing to witness this behavior, but you should understand that there is a built-in instinct, a strong drive in the foundress wasp to make sure this colony survives. And the way they do that is to make sure that the oldest larva in the nest that will become the first generation of female workers that will help this nest survive by hunting and protecting and building the nest for the following brood. This type of behavior helps make sure that that early developing larva survives. There's several reasons that the larva may be sacrificed to feed the others in the nest. One of those reasons is called food scarcity. This is because there may be a perceived need for more nutrition for the general population in the nest. And therefore, if there's not enough prey coming in to feed the nest through hunting and foraging for food, then they will simply use the food they have, which is the smaller larva in the nest. Now, another reason this may occur is if there's a problem with the larva itself, if there's a developmental issue, if it's not thriving, if it's not surviving anyway, they will pull it out and use it as food. And oftentimes there's also, competitive behavior in which other wasps will eat the larva of other wasps that were actually the foundress or queens of that nest. That's not the case in this one. There is no other competing adult wasp in this habitat that we've set up for this nest. She is the only one there, and she pulled this larva out probably just due to instinctual behavior. She gets fed mealworms daily. It's not like there's a huge food scarcity here. I mean, if you look at the larvae, they're nice and plump and well developed, and they look healthy, relatively speaking, for a wasp nest in captivity. So it was a little bit of a surprise to see this happen when it did, because all of the larvae in the nest seem to be thriving. But it is instinctual. They're going to do this sometimes regardless, in captivity or in the wild. You see it in both places. If you look at the other videos we have online here on YouTube, you'll also see this behavior with a Polistes diminula nest that had been put into captivity and was also removed from the wild. Same thing. They went after the larva in that nest occasionally, just instinctually. We've also documented this behavior in a Polistes fuscatus nest in the wild that we had remaining in the wild. We didn't bring it into captivity. It was not relocated. We were just filming a series of this fuscatus developing nest, and it turned out they did the same thing in the wild. So there must be a built-in part of their behavior that results in some larva being sacrificed randomly, or when they perceive for some reason there's a need to do that. So you're going to see her malaxating the larva, which is just chewing it up and drinking some of the fluids out of it, and then sharing the protein with the larva after that. If you look at some of our other videos, you'll see that the previous updates on this nest show that these larvae were really good eaters. They will eat a lot of food all at once. They are very active in the nest when feeding occurs, and the foundress wasp is doing a good job considering she's in captivity in a completely foreign environment. She adapted well and has begun to feed the mealworms to the larva as needed. And on this one case, this is the first time we've seen the larva pulled out to be fed to the other larva, but in general that has not been happening. This has been a very active nest, doing pretty well considering They have been brought into a completely foreign environment, not in their natural habitat. We actually found this nest, as you might have heard in some of the other videos, underneath the play structure at a community center locally here, and that nest had to go to protect the children there. We had to pull it out. We didn't want to kill it, so we relocated it here into captivity just for study. The Metricus wasp is an important part of the ecosystem here in northeastern Indiana and throughout their native range in the North American states. The reason they are important is because they help control the other insect population in this region. And they feed insects, usually caterpillars or soft-bodied larval stage insects, to their larvae. That's what they naturally feed on in the wild. And they really help control bugs around your yard, around your garden. So you want to see Metricus wasps around your place. Generally, you don't want to kill them if you don't have to. You can live peacefully with them typically most of the time. They generally don't attack. They're generally pretty docile towards people unless you directly threaten them. They're good for the environment. They're also helpful as pollinators, and that's why you want to keep these guys alive. On the other hand, if you see some of the invasive species like German wasps or German yellow jackets, that's Vespula germanica, or some of the European paper wasps such as the Polistes Metricus, those are invasive species, and they have been taking over the native range of wasps like these Metricus wasps. So those, if you have to kill wasps, those are the ones to get because they are invasive, they don't belong here, and they have been taking over some of the range of these other native species. And really, scientists are not entirely sure what the result of that is going to be. But typically, invasive species and the resulting issues with the ecosystem is not good. You see how active the larva is becoming during a pre-feeding ritual that they go through. Whenever they know there's food on the way, and they can tell through the vibration of the mother and the sound of malaxation or whatever they're sensing, they kind of know they're about to get fed. They don't know it's their sibling that's about to be fed to them, of course, but they are hungry all the time. And when the food comes near them, they begin to get more and more active, and they begin to produce what you see as a fluid coming out of their mouths. That's a sweet carbohydrate fluid that the adult wasps actually drink. So when she feeds them the protein from malaxated insects, they then feed her a little bit by providing liquid sustenance for her. Because adult wasps do not eat solid food. They eat liquids only. And the larvae eat solid food and not so much of the liquid. So it's a good exchange. Everybody wins. It's a back and forth give and take to keep everyone alive and healthy in this nest. And so the larvae become very active and begin producing that fluid every time there's about to be a feeding. So over the next few minutes here, you'll see her malaxating this protein for her larva. And once she's done with the malaxation process, you'll see her begin to feed each of the larvae until she runs out of food. And the larvae respond very aggressively. They'll open up their mouths real wide and gulp down large amounts of food. And that process will continue until the food is gone. And then she'll clean up a little bit, and that'll be the end of this video. So I'm going to let you just watch this for a while. We'll fast forward through the rest of the malaxation process and get to the feeding, and then we'll go back to real time to watch them get fed. As you watch the rest of the malaxation process, just take note of the forearms and how much dexterity she has in those arms. They're so good at manipulating their food. They put it into a perfect ball, and then they begin the feeding. Here we go back in real time. You're going to see the larvae begin to get fed, large chunks of meat, pulp, which was their former sibling, unfortunately for that one, but they obviously are pretty happy to get fed. As with most wasp nests, you're going to see that the oldest larvae, the ones that have been around the longest and are becoming the most mature, are in the center, clustered in the center of the nest. That is because when the nest is made, it starts out as one cell, right in the center. And then she builds another cell, and then another cell, so she'll have 3, then 4, and then 5, and she'll lay an egg immediately in each new cell. And as those eggs are the first brood to hatch, they become the adult worker wasps, and they begin to help maintain the nest. So the largest ones are generally always going to be in the center of the nest, at least in the beginning. Once they become pupating wasps and become adults and come out of that cell as adult wasps, then she'll lay an egg in the cell again. In the same cell that they just vacated, she'll immediately lay another egg, and then another generation will be born in there. So you can see her doing a good job here, doling out a little bit of food to each one. Each one of them could easily eat all of that food, literally eat the whole thing, but she has to be careful and try to make sure everybody gets a little bit, especially the guys in the center. Those are the ones she really wants to feed the most, the ones that are the most developed. You'll see the youngest ones out on the edges, including the one that's being fed now to the others, are the smallest and the newest larva. And as the nest expands, once the other workers are born and more of the nest gets built, you'll always see on the edges of the nest, those newest cells, those will have the newest eggs. And you'll see how that works as you go throughout the season. And we'll show you all of that as this nest grows. Hopefully it'll survive in captivity pretty well, and we'll be able to document each stage of the nest. As we've done with previous videos in this particular nest series, I'm going to put an image on the screen now to show you what the nest looked like when we found it underneath that children's play structure at the community center. At the time it had only eggs in it, and that has obviously changed quite a bit since they've been in captivity ever since May 21st of 22, and now it's July 15th. You can see the developmental process has gone along pretty well. One thing that does concern me about the nest is that typically as the wasp larva grows longer inside the cell, the Metricus queen or foundress will make the cell walls taller to accommodate the larger larva. And we did put some nest making material and wood inside the habitat that they could use for wood pulp to build more nest cell height, but that hasn't happened. So I am curious if this is going to happen properly in captivity or not, so we'll have to wait and see, and we'll keep you informed on that point. So as you can see here, the larvae are very interested in eating as much as they can possibly get, so the mama Metricus is kind of like, no, you don't get to eat it all, Junior. I got to send over to your sibling here. So she does her best to kind of not let them eat the whole amount of food, but it's got to be a challenge keeping up with those little guys because they can eat like crazy. So at this point, as far as we know anyway, there's only been one larva sacrificed for the rest, and that larva was eaten in this video. So we're going to have to see if any more are sacrificed for the others as we go along. We'll try to give as many mealworms as we can every day to this nest. We usually feed them twice a day. In the wild, they would constantly be going back and forth foraging for food for these larvae. So they may be underfed. It's hard to tell because many times we'll attempt to feed them and the foundress will decline the food, which tells me they're getting enough. So we'll see how it goes and we'll keep you informed. Appreciate you all liking and subscribing the videos already so far, and we'll keep it up if you keep it up. Thanks again and have a good one.